Okay. I see we have a few attendees already joining us. We are going to get started momentarily. We're just going to give people who are joining today's session some time to get in and ready for the conversation with Christine and Marc. And before I hand the presentation over to them, we do want to thank, on behalf of the entire team at E&E Leader, thank you for being a part of this summit. We've had fantastic feedback so far. If you haven't had a chance to download the awards book, it is available in the awards book chat within the lobby. So go ahead and download your copy of it. Again, you can communicate with other attendees via the chat feature here, submit all the questions you have for Christine and Marc as I welcome everyone here to how to extend your impact as an environment and sustainability leader. And before I introduce Christine and Marc, I do want to say thank you to Tony for giving us some positive feedback about using the Zoom app and Zoom platform for our summit this year. So Tony, thank you very much. Well, I am so pleased to be joined by Marc and Christine today. As I said before, they are joining us from Christine is joining us all the way from Australia, and Marc is joining us all the way from the UK. We appreciate you being here later in the day with both of us, but I don't want to take any more time. If we don't get a chance to get into questions today, don't worry, they'll follow up with you. But at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to both of them, and I look forward to connecting with you guys via chat.
Thank you, Jessica. So we'll get started. My name is Christine Adeline. I'm the Senior Vice President for Product Management at SEI 360. Just a little bit about SEI 360. We are a leading cloud software provider for environment, health, safety, sustainability, governance, risk compliance, and ESG software. And we offer one of the broadest set of modules in the market today to help companies digitalize all the processes across EHS, GRC, ESG, and sustainability. SEI 360 also offers learning content covering topics in ethics, compliance, and ESG in over 60 languages. We are a diverse company serving over 1,300 customers globally and across 25 countries. Joining me today is Marc Munier from DitchCarbon. Marc is one of our partners. Through the partnership with DitchCarbon, SEI 360 is able to extend its capabilities around how we help companies measure their emissions. I'll just let Marc introduce himself before we dive into our conversation and discussion today.
Thanks, Christine. Great to see everybody here today. So my name is Marc. I'm the founder of DitchCarbon. We capture carbon emission data at significant scale on companies, activities, and products, and then via API push them into fantastic bits of enterprise software, just like SEI 360. Climate change requires a global effort. So it's not just sustainability managers' challenge to measure and reduce carbon footprints, it's everyone's. And so, that's how we help make that a reality by giving people the insights they need to measure and reduce their emissions. Very happy to be here. Back to Christine.
All right. So in our session today, how to extend your impact as an environment and sustainability leader, it's going to be a conversation between Marc and I, and then we're going to just share some key takeaways at the end of the session. So I'll just start off by, just saying that the sustainability landscape as it stands is probably changing at a rate that most of us and most of you here on the call can keep up, especially with the more focus on environment, social, and governance, or ESG. And as most or a lot of countries are moving or making the move from into mandatory ESG reporting, I think there's a need for environmental and sustainability leaders to probably stay informed across those new legislations and requirements and what it means for your companies. And if you do understand those, I think you can then take a better view and have a more higher impact on what you do. Now, there's a lot of regulations, but there's also probably over 600 standards across ESG that are available today. So one of the things that as an environment and sustainability leader that you can do is probably familiarize yourself with these industry-specific ESG metrics from those standards like GRI, SASB, TCFD, CDP, ISSB, and some of the others that are now merging, such as the ISSB. With all of these frameworks that are available, sometimes you ask yourself, well, where do you start and what's important for you to look at? I think a couple of things when we get asked about this, we say, one, look at your industry and look at the frameworks that are more relevant for your industry. You know, SASB, for example, will give you different metrics based on your industries. Don't hesitate to look at what your competitors are doing. If you understand what your competitors are already doing, then gives you a good idea of what you probably should be looking at. Of course, understanding who your audience is that you're going to do your ESG reporting to, who your investors are, what they are interested in, your customers, as well as your employees as well. And I touched on emerging regulations, and I think this is very, very important for environment and sustainability leaders to keep on top of, is what are those emerging regulations that will make these reporting mandatory. And by understanding those, then you'll be able to help your organizations stay across and report on the right metrics. Which is where I'm going to ask Marc the question as to what legislation, Marc, do you think our audience should be aware of?
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount to consider, right? But there's a few bits that are up and coming that I think are particularly interesting. So the EU's carbon border tax really will extend the EU's power to anyone that wants to import across its border. And it comes into place in January 2024. So it's not like some faraway thing that, you know, we all don't need to worry about straight away. It's happening really very soon. So that means that anything that crosses the EU's border, it ramps up. So immediately on the 2024, I think it's aluminium and energy, and then it continues to, it will eventually cover all goods and services that cross that border. You need to have a carbon footprint attached to. This places a huge burden onto people that are looking to import into the EU. So that's one that I would definitely keep an eye on if I was in the position of many of our audience members today. The other one is the SEC ruling that's coming out hopefully later on this year. That will say what exactly North American companies need to disclose from that point of view. I'd also look kind of quite locally. So you know, multinationals are demanding that suppliers are disclosing to them, but also government contracts are also now requiring disclosures. So it's not so much that I find the legislation has created a bit of a bow wave. So, you know, 2024 may be the point at which the EU carbon border tax people are already responding to it. So you need to kind of swim fast to get ahead of that wave. I guess the CSRD one is the one that people talk about a lot, but I know that Christine, you're particularly familiar with that one. So I'll leave you to cover that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think CSRD, and for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive from the EU. And that took effect on January 5th, 2023. CSRD itself covers over 1,000 metrics across E, S, and G. and is said to have significant impact for ESG reporting globally, and it's not just the EU. It has about it has a lot of standards and requirements for E. It has about 5 that cover climate, pollution, water, marine biodiversity, resource use, and circular economy. And then it has about 4 for social, and then 1 for business conduct as well. And CSRD is applies to non-EU companies. So North American companies will have to take note of that. And the non-EU companies will be required to report on those if they have a physical presence in EU, and if they have a net turnover of over about 150 million euros. So non-EU companies are expected to start reporting end of June 2024. And like Marc was saying, it's not far away. So you've got to think about what, how you can get ready to start reporting for CSRD. It is also important to note that CSRD will require companies to report at a consolidated level. So they're not expecting you to just report on your EU subsidiary, but rather at your corporate level. So if you're a North American company and you have 1 or 2 EU-based subsidiaries, they expect you to roll that up in your global consolidated reporting of ESG. The EU will extend its reporting as well, and more non-EU based companies will be required to report on these by 2028. So they're going to slowly increase their requirements, and that's why it's going to have a major impact globally. CSRD, as you can see, will go far beyond what SEC will ask. Will ask a lot more. And it will create a lot of additional ESG reporting requirements for US-based companies that have European-based operations. Additionally, CSRD is going to make it, it's going to treat this non-financial data similar to financial grade information, and they're going to have third-party audits as well as to make sure that the data is of a good quality and a good source. Okay. So there are some questions coming in. We'll see how we go with time, and we'll answer those right at the end. So as I was saying with data, it will become key for you to have that for your reporting. But as an environment and sustainable leader, you will also need data to understand whether your actions are making an impact. So that's why having good quality data is going to be very, very critical for you as environment and sustainability leaders to really understand where you can make the biggest impact. So I'm going to ask Marc the question. There is a lot of need for quality data. There's also a big focus on companies to achieve their net zero goals and for emissions as well. So, but what is difficult and what do you see as challenging for companies to measure carbon emissions?
Somebody was just asking if there were slides with this. It's not, you just get to look at our wonderful faces as we're going through this. There will be materials that we can share afterwards. But the idea is to encourage you to ask lots of questions as we go through. So yeah, just specifically talking about carbon emission tracking and data, it is incredibly complex, really because nobody can quite agree in different regions what the right way is to measure the carbon footprint. So they provide various emission factors, so ways of calculating carbon emissions that vary based on region. So burning a lump of coal in Australia is different to burning a lump of coal in North America, subtly, but much bigger differences when it comes to vehicles. So they would be also counted as part of your scope 1. So fuel that you're burning in the vehicles that you're using in various regions change quite dramatically due to the carbon intensity or the efficiency of the various engines and the fuel mixes and all sorts that go around the world. So that's kind of one layer of complexity, and then it's matching all that up to what you need to calculate. That's for scope 1 and 2. But yeah, scope 3, I think, Christine, you're always asking me about scope 3, aren't you? So it's one of those ones that is particularly tricky because it tends to be things that are outside of your control. And so scope 1 and 2 are very quickly direct emissions and emissions from energy sources, both of which are fully within your control. If you choose to stop using fossil fuels to heat your factory or office, then that's something within your control. Scope 3 is the biggest chunk is normally supplier emissions. So that's emissions that you're buying in to do your business, so to speak. So that's complicated. And as you say, it's super important for the SEC or the CFRD disclosures as well. So we can help with that too. We capture carbon emission data at scale so that you don't have to, and kind of help you understand what your supply chain emissions are. And that's also coming into a near integration with SIA 360 as well. So it can be your single source of carbon emission data. And so I guess, that's kind of my thoughts on the scope 1, 2, and 3 and the importance of data accuracy and data quality, because the risk of getting it wrong is so high. You'll get accused of being greenwashing, or worst case, actually be penalised by the legislation.
So with all of this, so what's your best advice for someone who is not yet measuring carbon or is not even tackling scope 3 emissions? What can they do now? What are some of those simple things they can start doing now?
Simplest thing is just to start, just start measuring something, right? Everyone can measure their scope 2 emissions because all you need is your electricity bills. Most people can measure scope 1 because all you really need is your bills from your fuel supplier. So that might be mobile fuels or stationary fuels or whatever it is. So you can definitely do scope 1 and 2 today. And if you're not, it's not a huge leap to do it. Get in touch with the team at SIA 360 or one from DitchCarbon, and we can definitely point you in the right direction. So just start. I'd also say if you measured and now you want to try and reduce, setting an internal cost of carbon is what people talk about a lot when they're quite far down the road. They say that we've measured our carbon footprint, we want to reduce our carbon footprint, so we're going to add a cost of carbon internally that we're going to charge ourselves almost to try and compensate for that, so that a lower carbon option appears lower price as well. But the standard cost of carbon is $100 a ton. And that's going to be a lot on your bills, so to speak, or it's going to be a big, scary number. And so people are unlikely to optimize for that. But just start small. Start with $1 per ton, or 50 cents per ton, or 50 euro cents, or 50 whatever it is, right? And just start building that into start building that culture within your organization of saying, well, option A and B are exactly the same, but option B has got a bit less carbon. Okay, let's go for that one. That's pretty easy. Well, what if it's 105% of the cost of the other one? Should we do it then just based on carbon? Maybe we can if we use this internal cost of carbon. But if you don't start thinking about it, start optimizing for it in your operations, by the time you get to 24, 25, 26, when the legislation's really going to bite, you're going to be very fully prepared to actually change it. So that's my advice. Just start building that culture of optimizing for carbon in a really simple way. It's just set that internal cost, I would say. But I guess Yeah. Sorry, Christine, you going to say something? Or...
No.
No?
I was just about to say, Mark, there is a question here that I'd really like to answer, is what can I do now to best prepare for CSRD in 2024? It feels like we need to do a lot in a short amount of time. And, you know, it's a fantastic question, whoever asked it. And I think the first thing you need to look at is try and understand what the metrics are. And what you will find is that you are most likely doing or measuring a fair amount of those already, but you need to understand those, and you need to download the standards and go through it. There's a lot, but it's not hard to go through those and understand what you need to do. And like I said, then do a gap analysis, and you will find that most likely, but hey, I am, for example, already measuring or recording injuries that I need to work on. You probably have a process for recording incidents for risk and compliance. You probably are already doing some of those. It's just then taking the next step of how do you consolidate that and put it together and report on that at a global level. But I think it's just, there's a lot of information about it on the SAI 360 site. There's a lot more information about CSRD. We even have a lot of short blogs on that can help you. So if you head to that site, you will get a good start on CSRD. But understand the metrics, do a gap analysis, and you'll be hopefully pleasantly surprised that you are already doing some of it. It's just how you then round it up to that reporting. So I wanted to tackle that particular question before we just move on and look at the last bit of the presentation, because I thought that was a really good question. So I think
it was, Christine.
Yeah, it was.
So what, I mean, I guess, so like, you know, software is the solution to most things. So I guess what should people look for? Yeah, especially I guess in the context of CSRD and trying to kind of start this journey that we're encouraging people to do. What should they look for in software, I suppose?
Yeah, we get asked as a vendor, as a software vendor, we get asked, is there a software that can help us with the whole ESG? And I will safely say that there is no single solution. You probably are doing a lot of what is required of environment, social, and governance. So you need to, one, look at what you have internally. For example, your EHS software is probably providing you with scope 1, scope 2 emissions, but you probably need help with scope 3, and this is where DitchCarbon can help. You may have your human resources solution that is giving you some of the information that you need to report on ESG. Your procurement will give you information about your suppliers and supply chain. And also, you know, some of your other solutions for finance may have other information that you also need. So don't just think that you have to buy a new piece of software, look at what you have. But if you are buying, a couple of things that you need to consider is, one, how easy is it to collect data internally but also externally from your third parties, because you will need to collect data from third parties. Does it have inbuilt calculations to help you with carbon? And does it have latest emission factors? That's another one that you can look for. Can you change the workflows as well as the reporting? Because remember, ESG is changing fast. So you need to make sure that you're not stuck with a piece of software or you have to keep changing software. Because, like I said, you have to extract a lot of data for reporting, how easy it is to get this data into a report that you can submit is also very important when you look at the software. These are just some of the key characteristics, but again, I would stress that you probably already have some of this data. You need to understand what are the requirements and the metrics required for your reporting, then look at what you have, and then probably look at how you actually aggregate this data. I'd love to talk to you more. Yeah, go on, Marc.
I said, just to add to that, there's just a huge advantage of using your existing tooling, right? Like, because you're all used to it, you know, and then it's kind of business as usual. That's what we need to get to, I think, to really start driving that change. But I've kind of, yeah, I wanted to add on to that, Christine, as you're in your flow.
Okay. So there was one other question from Tony. It says, can you please show the list of regulations, acronyms as mentioned? Is there a place to find all of them? Oh, I wish, Tony, I wish there was a single place to find all these acronyms. I think that's one of the challenges around this whole ESG reporting. It's quite a lot scattered, and it's often known as the alphabet soup. Again, you know, we've got a key takeaway slide, which I hope everybody is seeing. We have put in some of the standards that the common ones that we believe you should start looking into, start learning about, so you can understand some of the common metrics that are required. So I did mention GRI, TCFD, you know, SBTI, Marc mentioned that, ISSB. So we've put all these acronyms here so you can go and look at those. And then familiarize yourself with ESG metrics and stakeholder needs. Marc mentioned some emerging regulations. Marc, if you want to just repeat some of those very quickly, so as key takeaways.
Yes. Yeah, the EU carbon border tax is the main one that I think everyone really needs to be very aware of and very awake of, because it doesn't appear to be that people outside the kind of core sustainability are aware of it and its impact. It's pretty much everyone, you know, imports something into the EU, I would have thought. And I guess just picking up the next bullet point as well, just start, you know, it doesn't need to be heavy, you know. If you, depending on where you are on your journey, just take that extra step, maybe set an internal cost of carbon, maybe start just asking your suppliers where they are, or use DitchCarbon to do that for you. You know, but there are tools out there to do it. It's just a single step. I did a post on LinkedIn yesterday, and just people were saying, well, what can I do to change? What can I do to kind of impact climate change with these huge heat waves that we're seeing around Europe at the moment? You can absolutely do something. I guarantee that every single person on this call can do something positive. So just take the first step.
Yeah. And remember, at the end of the day, what underpins all of those ESG requirements and ESG reporting, and even trying to understand the impact that you can make as environment and sustainability leaders, is data. So you need to just start looking at where you can collect this data, how you can aggregate this data across some of the key metrics that are required across those standards is a good way to start. Right. Some people say, Jessica, people still struggle to see the last slide. Not sure why.
Oh, I was about to say we can see it. I'm on as an attendee as well, and I see it on my end. So it might be something with the bandwidth where they're joining from. That would be the only thing I'm thinking of at this point.
Right. Okay. Well, all I can say is I know there's in 30 minutes. It's a big. There are a lot of big topics, but we just hope that Marc and I could share a couple of things that you need to get started with, and hopefully with the key takeaway slides that you will get access to, you'll have access to some of those acronyms and some of the things you can start looking at. If you want more information, head over to sai360.com or ditchcarbon.com. There are plenty more resources there around the topics we have covered today. Again, Thank you, and thank you, Jessica, for inviting us to participate today.
Oh, thank you both for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us today. It was great for you to join, and I know it's late, very, very late, especially Christine, where you're from. So we're not going to keep you, and I know Mark, you have some other things you need to attend to. So thank you for being here with us today. We are starting our official networking session. So as soon as I jump off this, I will hop on in, and you can join me, and we can meet some other people attending. So again, thank you for being here, and this will be available on demand.